Warning. Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat involves the discussion of horror and suspense movies. These movies often include violent, frightening, and disturbing content. Also, we sometimes discuss ladies and their lovely physical attributes, and we sometimes discuss topics considered naughty to talk about in polite company. This program is intended for audiences over the age of 18. Viewer discretion is advised.
All right, everybody, this is very important, so let's go through the schedule one last time. The taco truck and the gyro truck come on Tuesdays. Pants optional day is Wednesday. Please do not get these 2 days confused. The taco truck guy was pretty cool with last week's little mix-up, but the gyro truck guy, he was kind of rattled.
Sorry, I misread my calendar.
Yes, I heard all about it in the conference call with legal. Anyway, headquarters was able to smooth it all over, but I'd like to avoid using up all of the goodwill we've established with the new head of HR, so, if we can avoid any future confusion, I would appreciate it. Well, speaking of the new head of HR, looks like that's her on the phone now. Good morning, this is Carl speaking.
Good morning, Cal. This is Princess Penelope calling from PBDCtv headquarters.
Oh, good morning, Penelope. I hope things are going well with the move into your new office. From what I saw in last week's press conference, it looks very posh.
Yes, Cal, it's quite lovely. Once again, I would like to thank you and your team for your help with our little project from a week ago. I know things started out a little rocky, but I think we have settled into what should be a very mutually beneficial working relationship.
Well, it was our pleasure, Penelope. I'm just very glad that you were open to some creative and unconventional problem-solving techniques.
Cal, I could not agree more. Innovation and creativity are the keys to economic survival. In fact, that's the reason for my call.
Okay, now I'm not sure I like where this conversation's going.
Don't worry, Cal. Our agreement still stands. So long as I stay in good standing with the PBDCtv Board of Directors, you will retain complete creative control over Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. My concern is about your show's budget. Are you aware that your annual budget request includes a line item to support the operation of a massive space station in orbit over the East Coast?
Oh, that. Yeah, we do own a massive orbital space station. We use it as a broadcast platform.
May I ask how a free internet stream with only 3 regular viewers was able to acquire a space station?
Okay, well, you've probably heard that Steve the Cat is a compulsive gambler, and that is true. So the short story behind the space station involves, a high-stakes poker room in Macau, a Russian oligarch with a drinking problem, and a very unlikely straight flush to the jack.
I see. And you're only utilizing this station once a week to do a single live broadcast?
Well, so far, we've considered turning it into a bed and breakfast once the space tourism business really takes off, but that's not going to be for a few more years yet.
Cal, I have come up with a plan to utilize your space station as a profit center by subletting one of the space station's laboratories and cargo holds. It would ensure that we could fund at least one more season of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat.
Well, I do like the sound of that. What did you have in mind?
As it turns out, I have a potential investor in my office right now. Perhaps I should allow him to explain the plan.
Hello, Carl. This is... Well, you don't need to know who this is. Just call me Crimson Meerkat.
No, not this guy again. Please, no.
Yeah, this isn't all rainbows and unicorns for me either, but I need a new place to lay low for a while, and I've got an idea for you. So have Guinevere roll the opening credits for you while I walk you through the details.
Hello and welcome to Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, the place where we have fun discussing horror movies. I am your host, Steve the Cat. Well, folks, this is it. This is the last episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, at least for the year 2021. Now, if all goes according to plan, we'll air this episode on Monday, December 20th. Then we'll take some time off for the holidays, and then we'll need a little time to put together some new episodes for 2022. The good news is we have talked to the owners at PBDCtv, and they do want us back for another season. And it sounds like Carl and Princess Penelope are putting together a plan to pay for another season, although I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like, so maybe stay tuned as the broadcast goes on, and maybe we'll learn a little more about that. But we will be back in 2022. Although I'm not exactly sure when. I am hoping we'll be back up and running before the end of January, but frankly, we'll have to see how much work I can get done between now and then. Tonight, we wrap up the season by concluding our foray into Christmas-themed horror movies. Now, as I explained last week, I am not a huge fan of Christmas-themed horror movies. But last week, we were able to talk about a couple that I really enjoyed, which, unfortunately, did not leave a lot for this week. But I did manage to find a couple worth watching. A Norwegian film called Christmas Blood that's very similar in spirit to the original Halloween, and a campy Christmas splatter film called All Through the House that's a pretty fun throwback to 1980s splatter films. Plus, we finally all got a chance to see the original 1984 film Silent Night, Deadly Night, so I'll talk about that later on tonight as well. Tonight's show should be a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for joining us. Now let's all gather around your screens and pour yourself a cup of warm cider because here we go. Ho, 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 and welcome once again to Steve's Vocabulary Lesson. This, of course, is the part of the show where we discuss new and innovative words and phrases in an effort to stay ahead of social media bots and algorithms that would otherwise try to ban our conversation. And in honor of the season, we are once again doing a Christmas-themed vocabulary lesson. 4 words and phrases to review this week. Let's get into it. Number 1. Spreading Christmas cheer. This is a phrase that refers to the action of using surreptitious chemical assistance in the process of abducting, incapacitating, or otherwise abusing a character. Now, 11 months out of the year, we would refer to this as Dr. Huxtabling in honor of the name of a beloved fictional character who turned out to be not at all lovable because of this behavior. But during the Christmas season, we refer to this as spreading Christmas cheer. Now, one of the films we will be reviewing tonight is a Norwegian film, so I thought it might be fun to give you Norwegian translations of these terms. So the Norwegian translation of spreading Christmas cheer is Den Kosby-slippen. Kosby, of course, being a Norwegian slang term for rohypnol. The fact that it bears resemblance to the name of a formerly famous comedian is simply coincidental. Next on the list, we have firewood splitting. Firewood splitting refers to the action of striking a character in the head with an axe or hatchet. Now, most of the time we refer to this as axenclonking, but during the Christmas season we refer to this as firewood splitting, or in Norwegian we say okstilhudet. Coal-worthy. Yeah, kind of Seinfeld-esque on this one. Coal-worthy, as you might surmise, is used to describe a character who is sleazy, scummy, or otherwise undeserving of the audience's sympathy. Now, 11 months out of the year, we will sometimes refer to douchey boyfriends or douche nozzle boyfriends when doing the scorecard for a film. During the Christmas season, we refer to these characters as coal-worthy. And finally, our 4th term. Before we get into the 4th term, almost skipped over the Norwegian translation. The Norwegian translation of coal-worthy is kullverdig, and that's literal. That's not a joke. Our 4th word this time around is preparing for the Christmas cantata. This, of course, refers to the action of converting a character from an alto into a soprano through the rapid application of a bladed weapon. Most of the time we would refer to this as sopranoization, but during the Christmas season we refer to the process of removing one's willy and thus changing the register in which he sings as preparing for the Christmas cantata, or in Norwegian we refer to this as willy snippen. These words will become important later in the episode. Please keep them in mind, and that is Steve's Christmas vocabulary lesson for this week.
And now it's time for our featured film reviews.
Alright, let's get into the film overview for the film Christmas Blood. Now, wait a minute, Steve, that poster doesn't say Christmas Blood. Well, interesting thing about this movie, Christmas Blood, this is a Norwegian film. I did find it on Tubi. I have also found it on YouTube. It was originally called Juleblod in Norwegian. You can watch it with subtitles. I enjoyed it enough to do a review of it. I thought it was worth watching, but the English title of this is Christmas Blood. This is a Christmas slasher film that was released in the year 2017, directed by Reinert Kiel, K-I-I-L, Kiel. And the cast includes, I'm not going to lie to you people, I don't know who any of these people are. The cast includes a pair of Norwegian dudes and 6 attractive young Scandinavian ladies. Basically, they don't even have bios on IMDb, so I don't know what to tell you. Let's set your expectations for this film, and look at that, we have miraculously switched over from the Norwegian poster to the English language poster. What you should expect is a Christmas-themed slasher movie that is very reminiscent of Halloween, and this, as I said, is a Norwegian film with English subtitles, but it is worth watching. You might like this film if you like Halloween, if you like Silent Night, which we reviewed last week, or the older Silent Night, Deadly Night, or basically any Christmas slasher film. If you like any of those, you should like Christmas Blood. Halloween in particular, this movie is very much like a Christmas-themed remake of Halloween. We'll talk about that some more as time goes on. Here's the scale we like to use for calibrating your expectations. On the far left side of the scale, we have very campy films. On the far right side of the scale, we have very serious films. And as always, this is not a measure of the quality of the film. This is just a measure of what your attitude needs to be going into the film if you're going to optimize your enjoyment of the film. Christmas Blood is pretty much right down the middle. I've moved it a little bit to the right because, let's face it, it's Norwegian. It's not going to be a comedy. On the other hand, it is a slasher film. You can't get those too far to the right because there's just too much suspension of disbelief involved in a slasher film. So it's more or less straight down the middle, slightly biased to the right. So it's a serious slasher film, but it's still a slasher film. Let's get into a film summary. In this film, over a period of 13 years, Norway has been terrorized by a serial killer in a Santa suit who strikes at Christmas time. The killer is working from a list with over 300 names on it, so effectively he's working from a naughty list, which he leaves copies of behind from time to time, say in the mouths of his victims or what have you. The killer is finally taken down by a cop who, without spoiling it for you, has a very personal stake in the case. But, despite being shot repeatedly during his arrest, the killer inexplicably survives and therefore is imprisoned. Well, 6 years later, the killer escapes at Christmas time. Of course he escapes at Christmas time. And of course, immediately resumes his work. Meanwhile, as all this is happening, a group of 6 hot Scandinavian women are having a Christmas gathering, unaware that the killer is heading their way. So let's get into the villain profile now. They may have given this guy's name in the movie, but I have not been able to find a plot summary that gives me this guy's name, so we are just going to refer to him as the Santa Claus Killer. If you watch the film, they probably give his name, but I did not jot it down. I'm not going to go back and rewatch the movie just to get the guy's name. I have found a disappointing lack of information about this film online, so I was not able to find a good plot summary, so we're just going to call him the Santa Claus Killer. He is of the slasher serial killer class. His special powers include the fact that he is practically indestructible, much like Michael Myers. He is immensely strong, much like Michael Myers, and he is proficient with an axe, somewhat like Michael Myers. basically this guy's Michael Myers in a Santa Claus costume with an axe. His signature weapon is a single-bladed axe. Santa loves his single-bladed axe in this film. I won't say it's the only weapon he uses, but he uses it a lot, and he employs it in a variety of different ways. So let's talk about some of the things I liked about this film. Right off the bat, it has good production values. The film looks good on screen. This does not look like a real low-budget, cheesy horror movie. Despite the fact that the film takes place exclusively in the dark, the director manages to inject a good bit of lively color. He manages to work some blues into the lighting. The interior shots, especially at the house where the girls are having the party, have a lot of color. Now, I just want to unpack this a little bit. Understand that in December in Norway, it is dark 24 hours a day, so there is no daylight, period. So when I say this film takes place exclusively in the dark, that is literally true because that is realistic. If you're spending your Christmas in Norway, you're not going to see any daylight the whole time you're there. This film is reasonably well acted, or I would say it is reasonably well acted as best as I can tell, because as I have mentioned, the film is in Norwegian with English subtitles, so, you know, it's possible that they're acting poorly and I just don't recognize it because they're speaking Norwegian. And I should say the funny thing about this movie, I would say more than 90% of it is in Norwegian, but the six ladies that are in this film are from a variety of locations, and they do slip in and out of English a little bit, but for the most part the film is in Norwegian. The film makes a pretty good use of tension and suspense, much like the original Halloween, although this one does have a lot of blood in it as well, but it's not just a splatterfest. It does try to build tension and suspense when it needs to. And the practical special effects are respectable, and some of the kills are pretty intense. So if you're a slasher movie fan, you know, this one's above average, this one's worth watching. Things that could have been better about this film, well, right off the bat, I'm not going to lie. Although I like the film, it is very, very derivative. It's basically a remake of Halloween that takes place at Christmas. You have a killer whose motivation is not exactly understood, who is apparently indestructible because he got shot, yes, I believe it was, 6 times, and did not die. It's a holiday-themed killing, and he's immensely strong, and it's basically Michael Myers in a Santa costume. The 6 lovely Scandinavian ladies featured in the film seem a bit one-dimensional. Now, some of that may be, again, due to the fact that the film is in a foreign language and I'm losing out on some of the subtlety and subtext and such because I'm having to work from subtitles instead of understanding the dialogue directly. They do have, to some extent, some personalities to them. It's like, okay, you know, this one's the good girl, this one's the slut, and so on. But they're not as well developed as could be. You assume that these 6 girls went to school together, but it's not exactly really well developed. They talk about when they were together in Sydney, so it's like, did they all go to school in Australia together? Or how did all these Norwegians end up in Australia? They never really get into the details of that. To follow up on that, one of the 6 girls cannot speak. She uses sign language, cannot speak. It's not clear to me if she is deaf and mute or just can't speak. For some reason, after watching the movie a couple of times, I get the impression that she can hear, just can't speak. But again, it's one of those things they don't really explain. I mean, it's, you know, throughout the film, you have one character who's using sign language who cannot speak, but they never really come out and say, oh, this is my friend Elizabeth, she can't hear, or what have you. So you're kind of left guessing as to exactly what the backstory is there. The film seems to drag a bit at places, especially in the middle. Okay, so it has a bit of a Scandinavian movie pacing to it. It's a little slower than an American slasher film would be. The film takes place entirely in the dark, as I said, which is realistic, but sometimes it's hard to see exactly what is going on. Some of the shots that are done in interiors with not a lot of light, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. Is the killer working from a list or not? You know, at the beginning they set this guy up to be working from a list, and the list seems to kind of be important in the broad strokes of things, but once he gets to kind of where he's going, it just seems to be that he's killing whoever he comes across, because he's killing people who are not on his list in this movie. And finally, I've made a point here about the availability of an uncut version. Now, when I watched this film the first time, I watched it on Tubi, which would have been the theatrical release, so presumably R-rated film. Then I went to watch it again to take my notes. The first time I watch a film for this show, I just watch and don't distract myself by taking notes, and if I like it well enough, I go back and watch it a second time and take some notes. When I went back to watch a second time, Tubi didn't have this film anymore, so I don't know if they have it again right now, but as I'm recording this in November, it's not available right now. Now, I was able to find it on YouTube, so I rewatched it on YouTube, did my notes from YouTube, but as I got about a third to a halfway through the movie, it occurred to me that this does not seem exactly like the same movie I watched before, and then it occurred to me, it's like, oh, this is YouTube, it's been edited. They've cut out some of the gore and so on, so what you're seeing is a review of a movie where my impressions are based upon seeing the theatrical release, but the notes are based upon seeing a YouTube-friendly cut. I don't know right now if you're going to be able to find a theatrical cut of this movie short of actually, renting it or buying it. There is a version available on YouTube, but it does have a little bit of stuff cut out of it. So let's get to Steve's scorecard for this film, Kills. There are 16. There are quite a lot of kills in this film. Bare breasts. I've put asterisks here. Now, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about before. When I watched this film the first time, I thought I remembered a little bit of nudity, but I did not note any bare breasts when I watched it the second time around. But then again, when I watched it the second time around, I was watching on YouTube, so it's entirely possible that that's just kind of been edited out. So, if you watch the version on YouTube, you're not going to see anything. If you are able to find it somewhere else, you might. Denogginings. Yes, there is one. Do you want to build a snowman? Well, you'll get to see, that he actually builds a snowman using somebody's head. Coitus interruptus. Not once, but twice do you have coitus interruptus in this film. Spreading Christmas cheer. Yes, the process of surreptitiously putting chemical assistance in somebody's drink to speed along a social engagement. Yeah, that happens. And it's with a Tinder date. I'm like, dude, she's a Tinder date. And you needed to drug her anyway? How desperate are you? Firewood splittings. You get multiple. Coal-worthy boyfriends. You get one. And finally, coal-worthy Tinder dates. This is separate from the coal-worthy boyfriend. You get 2 of those, so you've got a coal-worthy boyfriend plus, later in the movie, 2 coal-worthy Tinder dates, so 3 douche nozzle guys in this film. But with your viewing of Christmas Blood, you also get some bonus features such as a killer who is definitely not Michael Myers. Sure, we don't know exactly why he does what he does. Sure, he survived being shot repeatedly, he spent all of his time in captivity staring at the wall, and his doctor considers him a manifestation of pure evil, but he is totally not Michael Myers. You get a fat, shirtless Norwegian cop, so for those of you who complain that we do a count of breasts but nothing else, here you go, ladies, here's something for you. You've got a fat, shirtless Norwegian cop. Merry Christmas, enjoy. You get out, you Swedish hoe! Yeah, that's pretty funny. If you watch the movie, it's pretty funny. Just the line by itself might not be funny without context. You get an inexplicably abandoned Norwegian town. Yes, this town seems to be completely abandoned. Now, in fairness, as they're outdoors in this movie for one scene, they do mention that the temperature is minus 32 degrees Celsius, which for those of us who speak English standard units, that is 0 degrees Fahrenheit, so that is pretty damn cold. So it's not surprising that nobody's outside, but it seems like all the buildings even in town are abandoned, like nobody's home anywhere. It's like everyone left. So in that respect, again, it's kind of like the original Halloween where Laurie Strode is running around and nobody's home. And finally, do women this hot really need Tinder? Now, I could not find a whole lot of good pictures of this film, but I do have one picture of Elizabeth here. This is the character who cannot speak, and this is after she's been chased by the serial killer, so she's not looking her best here, but still, does this woman need Tinder? Now, I'm going to chalk this up to the fact that in Norway, this time of year, when it's 0 degrees Fahrenheit outside, nobody leaves the house, and therefore, if you're looking for a hookup, you can't really go to a bar. So Tinder's your only option. That's the only plausible explanation for this, because otherwise I don't know why these 6 women would need Tinder. So let's get to Steve's final score for this film. We're going to give it 2.5 paws out of 4. This is a very derivative but reasonably entertaining Christmas slasher film. It's basically a Norwegian remake of Halloween, except at Christmas time, but it uses intelligent direction and good production values to somewhat overcome its predictability. So I enjoyed this film. Not the best film I've ever seen, but as I mentioned last week, I'm usually not a fan of Christmas slasher films in general, so the fact that I even consider this one above average should tell you that it's a decent slasher film. So if you're looking for a Christmas-themed slasher film, you can do worse. Now, as I said one last time, this is a Norwegian film, so you are going to have to watch it with the subtitles or the closed captioning on to know what's going on, unless you happen to be fluent in the native language. But otherwise, an enjoyable movie, and frankly, it's a slasher film, so it's not too terribly hard to follow using the subtitles. So 2.5 paws out of 4, and that is our review of Christmas Blood.
This is Mikey from Out of the Ordinary, and you're watching PBDCtv.
Oh, hi! First thing in the morning, when I'm listening to music and getting a little bit of time for some creepy research, I'm always representing with my PBDC merch. What a better way to have a cup of coffee in the morning.
Don't forget to check out our other cool merch at rootsbleedred.com. That's rootsbleedred.com.
This is Professor Edgar Fluffosaurus from Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, and when I'm not hosting Monster Chat or knocking down small Japanese cities, I'm watching PBDC TV. Now back to the show.
evening and welcome to Channel 9 News. I am your host, Randall Barkington III. We interrupt our regular programming to take you live to PBDCtv headquarters in Transylvania, Romania for a live press conference.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Princess Penelope and I am the Vice President of Human Resources for PBDCtv. I am here today to announce an exciting new joint venture between our network and the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. This effort promises a great leap forward in the search for both alien life and long-lost copies of classic horror movies. I am pleased to introduce Mr. Crimson Meerkat, author and expert on alien abduction, who will lead this exciting new venture.
Hello, my name is... Well, you don't need to know what my name is. Just call me Crimson Meerkat. Yes, that's my code name, Crimson Meerkat. Now, as many of you know, I am a credentialed writer with deep experience in the fields of extraterrestrial life and alien abductions, and you must listen to me. It is my great pleasure to stand before you today as the head of this new joint venture between PBDCtv and SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. This venture will be called Project Brevity. Brevity, of course, stands for Blockbuster Reconnaissance and Extraterrestrial Video Intercept, Transcription, and Identification. And yes, I know brevity is supposed to end with a Y. You try to come up with an acronym that contains a Y. It can't be done. This name also is doubly appropriate because this project, well, Congress has only appropriated funds for 1 year. So we'll see how it goes after that. Now, some of you may be wondering, what does PBDCtv have to do with the search for extraterrestrial life? Well, the answer to that question comes from this photograph. 18 months ago, scientists at SETI recorded an audio transmission from space that contained the following image. The contents of this image baffled experts from around the world, until the experts at PBDCtv were able to determine that this is in fact an image of Bruce Dickinson from the 1981 horror film The Incubus. Why is this important? Well, as many of you know, I have long suspected that aliens were responsible for the sudden disappearance of VHS cassettes and Blockbuster video stores from modern society. This image supports my hypothesis. You see, The Incubus is exactly the sort of VHS-era film that aliens would have acquired when they stole all the Blockbuster video stores. I believe that this also provides us the opportunity to track the aliens back to their home location. How? Well, consider this example. When a ship sinks in the ocean, it's like a needle in a haystack. It should be nearly impossible to find, and yet ocean explorers do find them. They do this by looking for the ship's debris trail. You see, as a ship sinks, lightweight items, things like deck chairs or Leonardo DiCaprio, float away from the ship before they sink, while heavy items, things like steam boilers or Kate Winslet, settle to the bottom very close to the ship. So the result is a long debris trail that literally points to the shipwreck like an arrow. I believe I can track the location of the aliens using a similar approach, which I call pornological index triangulation. We know that when the aliens stole all of our VHS cassettes, they were looking for porn. But they just took everything because they couldn't jam our radar long enough to give them time to sort through each individual tape. But transporting all of those VHS cassettes is difficult and expensive. So I postulate that the aliens would begin sorting the tapes and start throwing things overboard almost immediately. First, they would throw out tapes of kids' programs, then the wholesome family sitcoms, then romantic comedies, and so on and so on. Horror movies with lots of naughty bits would be thrown out much later, much closer to the aliens' final destination. So, by monitoring outer space for transmissions that can be traced back to VHS movies, and by assessing the pornological index for each of these transmissions, I think we can construct something analogous to a debris trail that will point us directly to the aliens' home. And this is where PBDCtv comes in. With their deep knowledge of inane horror movie trivia and their depraved sensibilities, I can think of no place better suited to the decryption of these signals and evaluating their pornological index. So my organization will be paying PBDCtv to rent space on their orbital broadcast platform and for expert consulting to decrypt and evaluate horror movies. At this point, I would welcome any questions from the media.
Yes, Mr. Meerkat, this is Randall Barkington III at Channel 9 News, and I have a question. If your theory is correct, would it not make more sense to simply scan deep space for pornography?
That's an excellent question, Randall. You see, the problem is that the aliens have accumulated so much pornography that the sheer mass of their videotape collection tends to warp space and time. Much like a black hole, this prevents any pornographic signals from escaping. We believe this is why the image from The Incubus was so distorted. We postulate that this film was thrown overboard close to the aliens' home location. Not so close that a signal could not escape, but close enough to cause a distorted image. So, if we look for straight-up porn, we'll never find them. But, if we look for horror films with naughty content, we should be able to get close. Next question.
Yes, please, another question, Mr. Meerkat. Again, this is Randall Barkington III at Channel 9 News. You have become famous over the years by touting a number of conspiracy theories, many of which attribute behavior to the government that is shocking and offensive. How can the public square your past distrust of the government with your current participation in what is a government-funded project.
I am not a sellout, if that's what you're trying to imply. Oh, you vipers in the media, you disgust me. Well, as you know, I have launched a number of Freedom of Information Act requests over the years, and the government's General Services Administration has decided that rather than comply with all of these requests, it would be cheaper for the government to simply put me on payroll. Plus, I recently got on the wrong side of the Hooters Corporation, and frankly, I need all the friends I can find. Does anyone else here have a question? Is there anyone else even here? No? No one showed up to the press conference except Channel 9? Doesn't PBDCtv own Channel 9? Oh, I told you we should have put out some snacks. Okay, Randall, anything else you want to ask?
Yes, Mr. Meerkat, one final question regarding project personnel. Is it true that you have hired Malcolm Fluffosaurus as your chief scientific advisor?
Yes, Malcolm comes from a long line of credentialed scholars. Despite our many disagreements, I do respect his father Edgar Fluffosaurus, and I look forward to working with Malcolm on this new project.
Is it not true that Malcolm Fluffosaurus, in fact, has no academic credentials of any kind?
Wait, what? That can't be right. He's got a PhD. He comes from a long line of... Hang on, what's that, Penelope? He's a rapper and a DJ? He only took the administrative assistant job with you so his mother wouldn't throw him out of the basement? But what about his academic title? It's... Oh, I see. So, Doctor of Sick Beats and Groovy Jams is not an actual academic title. Oh, well, that's very disappointing. All right, I'm going to have to revise a few plans, because we're required to be up and running by early 2022, and I've already signed Malcolm to a contract. With that, this press conference is over. Thank you for joining us.
We will continue to monitor this story and bring you new information as it breaks. This has been a Channel 9 News special report. Now, back to our regular programming.
Let's get into our next holiday-themed featured film review. This time around, we're going to be talking about a film called All Through the House. And there you see the poster. This is a Christmas slasher horror film that was released in the year 2015, directed by Todd Nunez. And the cast includes Ashley Mary Nunez, Jessica Cameron, and Jennifer Wenger. Let's get into setting your expectations for this film. So, if you're going to sit down to watch All Through the House, what you should expect is an above-average Christmas-themed slasher film that is reasonably fun if you don't take it too seriously. This is a pretty formulaic, traditional-style splatter slasher film, so this is not an art film, but it's an enjoyable film if you just enjoy a good straight-up slasher movie. If you like the movie Silent Night that we talked about last week, you might like this film. Or if you like the original Silent Night, Deadly Night, or any of its sequels, you might like this film. Or if you like the film Christmas Blood we talked about a little earlier in this show, you might like this film. I've also put in this list Friday the 13th. This film is more reminiscent of a Friday the 13th style slasher movie than a Halloween slasher movie. It's not quite as big on tension and suspense as the Halloween series. It's more just about the... It's just more about the thrills and the kills, such as you would have gotten with the Friday the 13th series. So, if you're a fan of the Friday the 13th series, you will probably enjoy this film. Let's get into calibrating your sights for going to see this film. This is the scale we like to use. On the left side of the scale, we have very campy films, such as Jason X. On the very right side of the scale, we have very serious films such as The Silence of the Lambs, and as always, understand that this scale is not a measurement of the quality of the film. This is a measurement of the attitude you need to going into the film if you're going to maximize your enjoyment of the movie. All Through the House, kind of a conventional slasher film, so we've put it to the left side of the center line, but not all the way over to the left. It's not an outright comedy, but you don't want to take it too seriously. So it's not full-blown campy, but at the same time, it's not an 80s movie, but it's certainly an 80s style splatter film. So you want to go into it with the appropriate mindset. Kind of reminiscent of Wrong Turn 2 that we talked about a few weeks back. Just a pretty conventional straight-up splatter film. Let's get into a summary of this film. In this film, the Garrett household becomes a bit of a spooky holiday suburban legend after 5-year-old Jamie Garrett is kidnapped at Christmas time and disappears without a trace, and nobody ever figures out what happened to her. Was she taken by criminals? Did the family do something with her? Was she taken away by Krampus? So it kind of becomes the thing that all the kids in the neighborhood speculate about, and eventually the Garrett household becomes much like the Myers house would have been in Haddonfield, where it's the house in the neighborhood that's kind of spooky and everybody talks about. The difference being that somebody actually lives in this house. Anyway, 15 years later, after 15 years of whispering and speculating about what happened at the Garrett house, Ms. Garrett reemerges from her solitude and begins decorating for Christmas, wanting to recapture the joy of the holiday after years in isolation. So her neighbor Rachel, who is 22 years old and who is home from college, plus 2 of Rachel's friends, agree to take on the odd job of helping Ms. Garrett decorate the house in exchange for some holiday cash, because as we know, college students are always in need of some holiday cash. What does any of this have to do with the masked Santa killer who has descended upon the neighborhood? Well, you will have to tune in to find out, as all these storylines eventually come together. So, about that masked Santa killer, let's talk about him a little more. So, in this film, they do identify the killer, but it is a bit of a whodunit, and I'm not going to give you a spoiler, so we are just going to refer to him as the Santa killer with the Krampus mask. And there you see him with his big bug eyes. The actor that was picked to play this part was obviously picked exclusively for his talent for making his eyes look big and bugged out behind this mask. There you see him stalking Rachel. He is of the slasher serial killer class. His special powers are nothing special. He has your typical serial killer strength, resistance to damage, and stealth, which means above average of that of a regular human, but certainly nothing on the Jason Voorhees supernatural end of the spectrum. He also has exceptional proficiency with a pair of hedge trimmers. So naturally, you might say his signature weapon is the garden hedge trimmers, which he employs using a variety of different techniques, both stabbing and snipping techniques. So let's talk about the things I liked about this film. So this is not an exceptional film, but it is a pretty good film, and one that is a lot of fun if you do not take it too seriously. The film is not afraid to break a few slasher film taboos. Now, it's not as over the top as some, but it doesn't go so well for Granny in the wheelchair, for example. You have respectable but not exceptional practical special effects. They are good enough to keep you entertained. There's lots of blood, and there are some reasonably entertaining kills if you're into that sort of thing. If you're not into that sort of thing, this movie is not really for you because, as I said earlier, this is a Friday the 13th style splatter film. It's basically a splatter film for a splatter film's sake. There is a little bit of whodunit to it, but you know, it's not that difficult to figure out. So if you're not into that sort of thing, probably just give this film a pass. It does keep the story moving. It does not drag, which is good. And like many horror films, this one has a twist at the end. Now, unlike many horror films, a lot of horror films tend to stretch that twist out too long at the end. This one seems to get it about right. It might feel like it goes on a hair too long, but not nearly as bad as some horror movies that just go completely off the rails in the final act. This one seems to get it pretty close to correct. Now let's talk about a few things that could have been better with this film, and the first thing that jumped out at me about this film is the cinematography and the lighting, especially early in the movie, are a bit subpar. So the initial visuals of the film are going to make you think it's a worse film than it really is, but I recommend you stick with it anyway, so let me unpack that a little bit. If you have watched enough slasher films on Tubi, you start to develop kind of a nose for these things where just based upon the quality of the lighting and the quality of the cinematography, you can get a feel for, you know, is this kind of a middle-of-the-road movie? Is this a below-average movie? Is this a really bad movie? Is this a really good movie? This one might mislead you into thinking it's not going to be as good as it ends up being. The movie is better than the lighting and the cinematography and the use of camera filters would lead you to believe it's going to be. So if you turn this on and after a couple of minutes think, oh wow, this is going to be a real low-budget, cheap cheese fest, stick with it anyway. You'll probably like it more than you think you're going to. The villain's backstory is bizarre and nonsensical. Yet at the same time, it is a completely derivative and predictable mishmash that feels like it combines every slasher film ever made. It just It seems like they took the twist from every slasher film that's been made since 1978, threw them all into a blender, and just pulled little pieces out and served them on a plate together. Also, overall, the film is just very formulaic and very predictable, and this kind of goes with the fact that the killer's backstory just seems simultaneously bizarre and predictable. If you go in expecting art, or if you go in expecting originality, you are going to be disappointed by this film. But if you go in expecting to have fun and not take it too seriously, you should enjoy it. So this is the kind of film that you enjoy with your friends, have a few drinks, and just watch this one and just enjoy it, and don't poke at it too hard with your brain. Let's get to Steve's scorecard for this film. Kills, 13. That includes a dog and, sadly, a cat. Bare breasts, 3. Now that is 2 real and 1 special effect. So let me unpack that a little bit. So there are 2 different shower scenes in this film. One in which a very attractive lady stays topless for basically her entire appearance in the film. Those are real. And then you have one victim who is stabbed while in the shower, stabbed right through the breast, and therefore they used a breast special effect. And I assume that they only showed the one because, first of all, they probably had tubing and a blood pump and everything else right outside the range of view of the camera, obstructing the other one. And also, you probably, even if that stuff were not obstructing the view, you probably would have been able to see that one of these is clearly natural and one of these clearly isn't. So it's probably best that they did it this way. So an odd number, which is not something you normally get in these movies. Really unattractive hats. You get one used continually in this movie, and I'm going to show you a picture in a minute because I had an issue with this hat. Instabinatings, the loss of digits. Yes, you get one slice and at least 3 digits. I did not pause and back up to see if the Krampus killer got 3 or all 4 fingers, but at least 3 digits in one slicing motion. So you had a pretty nice instabinating in this film. Cash drawings, 1. Yes, somebody grabbed by the ankles and dragged under the bed by the monster under the bed. Spreading Christmas cheer. Yes, there is one. Folks, it's that time of year. Check the eggnog before you drink it. And finally, preparing for the Christmas cantatas. There are 2, plus many more implied. It is Willy Snippin' action a go-go in this film. Oh, yes, that is one of the things that makes this one kind of fun. If you can get past the squirm factor of that. There are many young men who are prepared for the Christmas cantata and converted into a soprano in the span of this film. So let's get into some of the voluminous bonus features that you get with this film. You get self-canoodling, which, as always, I could have done without. You get severed willies. But not only severed willies, you get more severed willies. Yes, you get multiple views of severed willies on the floor. White severed willies, black severed willies, so yes, you get to make any comparisons should you want to. And of course, you also get the cat munching on a severed willy, which, again, I could have done without. You get Santa's big old sack of severed willies. Yes, there is a trend here. Santa is collecting severed willies. You get a cookie tin to the head, which cracked me up. You get a totally unnecessary cat killing, and I'm sorry, I have to talk about this for a second. Now, the killer does kill a dog earlier in the movie, which, is sad, but it's at least, I won't say justifiable, but you can at least understand why he did it. He was trying to be stealthy, and the dog was going to give his position away, so he killed the dog so the dog wouldn't start barking. That's the thing that happens in movies sometimes, and it's sad, but it's at least, it somewhat makes sense from the killer's perspective. In the case of the cat, the killer had already taken care of his victim, and the cat was fine with it. The cat was on board. The cat was just sitting there fastidiously cleaning its paws, saying, hey, I've got nothing to do with this. I'm just sitting here minding my own business. And the killer, for whatever reason, took the cat out anyway, and it struck me as nonsensical, and it struck me as it did not really seem to mesh with the killer's backstory. But anyway, you have a totally unnecessary cat killing. You have Granny in a wheelchair launching action. Yes, they reenact that classic scene from the movie E.T., except with Granny in a wheelchair instead of Elliot on his bicycle. You get girl-on-girl lingerie adventure rumpus interruptus. Yes, you are promised a really, really smoking pair of women in a girl-on-girl lingerie adventure in this film, and it gets interrupted by the Krampus killer, so it never happens. So there is a bit of disappointment there. And finally, you get Rachel's horrible hat and her decidedly less horrible slutty princess dress. So let's check out this hat. I'm sorry, this knit cap that they have her wearing throughout the movie, she never takes it off. She's indoors, she's outdoors, she's always wearing this thing. She's like a South Park character with her knit cap. She just never takes it off until she drinks the eggnog. She drinks the eggnog, she gets Dr. Huxtabled, she wakes up, and the villain has changed her into a princess dress, which this picture does not give away just how short this skirt is. This dress would be a suitable length for a 7-year-old girl, not for a 22-year-old woman. So I don't know if they put the hat on her just to make the transformation at the end that much more stunning. I don't know. Was not a fan of the hat, was more tolerant of the dress. So let's get to Steve's final score for this film. Once again, we give this one 2.5 paws out of 4. We're going to call this one an above-average slasher film that is more than a little bit formulaic, but ultimately ends up being a good bit of fun if you do not take it too seriously. So, as is the case with so many of these kinds of films, it really depends upon your expectations going into the film. If you go in expecting just to have fun with a straight-up slasher film, you should enjoy this one. It's a pretty good, seasonably appropriate slasher film. I mean, it's pretty, I would say, not middle of the road. I would say it's above average as the total universe of slasher films go. As Christmas slasher films go, this one's pretty good just because there seems to be, in my opinion, a lot of really bad Christmas-themed slasher films out there. So this one is a good choice if you're looking for something Christmas-themed. So recommend this film all through the house. 2.5 paws out of 4. Available free with ads on Tubi, at least at the time that I am recording this. And that is Steve's final score for All Through the House. Well, we are almost to the end of this season finale of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. But before we go, it's time to talk about other things Steve watched this week. Now, we're going to try out something a little different that we might carry over into next season. We're not just going to talk about other things Steve watched this week. We're going to kind of go around the horn and see what several of us watched this week. But we're going to start with me. This is Steve the Cat, and I watched, yes, as we discussed last week, I finally got around to watching the original 1984 film Silent Night, Deadly Night. This, of course, is the infamous 1984 slasher film that was pulled from theaters after 6 days due to public outcry. Although, as I recall, the public outcry was more over the advertising campaign and the fact that they were showing TV commercials of somebody in a Santa suit with an axe during the 8 o'clock family hour. Now, in this film, a young boy named Billy suffers a number of Santa-related traumas on Christmas Eve, culminating in the death of his parents at the hands of somebody in a Santa suit. And bonus, life keeps throwing Santa drama at Billy until, of course, he finally snaps. Now, as I suspected, finally getting around to watching this movie confirmed what I suspected. It's a pretty typical cheap 80s splatter film. Not bad, not outstanding. Probably has more of a reputation than it deserves just because of the controversy that surrounded its theatrical release. But if you're a fan of 80s splatter films, not bad, worth watching. Now, at the time, I found this available free with ads on Tubi, so that's Silent Night, Deadly Night. Let's throw things over now to our buddy Crimson Meerkat.
Hello, this is Crimson Meerkat, and let's talk about some of the other things I watched this week. Now, I am not the big movie buff like these guys are, but I did watch a movie called The Thing, and this was made in 2011. So we are talking about the 2011 remake of the 1982 John Carpenter classic, which, of course, is a remake of a much older film. This film actually acts as a prequel to the 1982 film, even though it was made in the year 2011. So if that's not sufficiently confusing, I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, this is a perfectly ordinary creature feature. Not bad, nothing special, but it absolutely pales in comparison to the 1982 original, which makes it seem like a worse film than it actually is. So, if you're a fan of the 1982 film, you will probably be disappointed by this movie. If you can sit back and watch it objectively, I'm not going to say it's a great film, but it's probably better than you think it is, although still not great. There's far too much computer graphic special effects in this compared to the brilliant practical special effects from the 1982 film, so not a worthy successor to the 1982 film, but viewed in a vacuum, I'd say it's mediocre. I would say it's not bad. But compared to the 1982 film, it is a disappointment. So let's throw things over to Carl and see what he watched this week.
And hello, this is Carl. And for this week, for other things Carl watched this week, I took a stroll down memory lane and watched Godzilla vs. Megalon. Now, this movie holds a very special place in my heart because this is a 1970s era Godzilla film that just so happens to be the first Godzilla film that I ever went to see in a movie theater. At least I believe it was. I distinctly remember going with my best friend in the world to see this movie in the theater in the 1970s, and so this was quite the warm trip down nostalgia lane for me. Now, that said, in this movie, an undersea community of toga-wearing weirdos gets upset about a nuclear test and releases the monsters Megalon and Gigan on humanity for revenge. And of course, mankind's only hope is Godzilla, and a robot named Jet Jaguar. Now, this is not Ultraman, this is Jet Jaguar. If you get the two confused, you will be mocked. Jet Jaguar, not Ultraman. That said, this is a pretty campy Godzilla film. It is likely not a great choice if you are just a casual fan. Now, if you're a big Godzilla fan, you will love this film. If you're not a big Godzilla fan, this one's probably not the one that should be #1 on your list. This is one of the campier ones. When we reviewed Godzilla films earlier this season, we talked about how some of them get kind of weird and involve aliens and things, and this one kind of goes into that vein. It's not nearly as friendly to casual fans as something like 2002's Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. But if you enjoy Godzilla movies, absolutely recommend this one. If you don't like Godzilla movies, this one's unlikely to change your mind. But that is Godzilla vs. Megalon, and that is what I watched this week. Well, with that, we've come to the end of Season 2 of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it. A special thanks to those of you who joined us for every episode this season. Yes, we have done 14 consecutive episodes of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat in Season 2, going all the way back to September. Now, if you did enjoy the show, please remember to like and share and subscribe and follow. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube and on Rumble at Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. And yes, that is Tales spelled with an A-I-L-S. As always, please remember to check out all of my friends and their great programming on PBDCtv. Whether you're interested in horror, true crime, weird history, or unexplained events, we're sure to have something for you on PBDCtv. You can find us on the World Wide Web at PBDCtv.com, and we're on YouTube at PsychoBunnyDC. We've also got a large presence on Facebook. You can find the mothership at PBDCtv, or you can go directly to dedicated pages for channels like Psycho Bunny Death Cult, Psychomantium 13, and Roots Bleed Red. Each channel has a slightly different atmosphere, but they're all a part of the PBDCtv broadcast collective. And keep your eye out for a PBDCtv page on Rumble, which we are getting going as the year winds down. We have had a lot of fun putting together Season 2 of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, and we hope you all enjoyed it. This season was a big change relative to Season 1. The episodes were a lot longer, the production was a lot more complex, and frankly, I think the quality was even better than Season 1. We didn't do everything I wanted to do in Season 2, but frankly, that was my fault for being overly ambitious before the season started. And the good news is, it leaves things available to do next season. Now, we will be posting things to Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat to tide you over while we're between seasons. So please, make sure you've subscribed so you don't miss anything, and make sure to check back in with us on Facebook or YouTube often. In the meantime, that's a wrap on Season 2. Thank you so much for joining us. Please have a very Merry Christmas and a joyful New Year, and we'll see you again in 2022. Good night, everybody.